I've known Mark for a long time now. It was probably, I'm trying to think, it might have been, I was living in Sydney at the time and I was back for a swell, and yeah, it was really big. He rang me from Melbourne the night before. I'm like, hey, it's going to be pumping, like get down here early. It's like lower tide, it'll get too full. And he, is it all right if I elaborate? Because it's a pretty long story. Yeah. But yeah, anyway, he rang me and I'm like, yeah, meet you at 6:30 at Winki car park. It'll be pumping. And sure enough, got there at 6:30 and he wasn't there, and I shot him a message and he rings me. He's like, oh man, sorry, you just woke up. Can you wait for me? And I'm like, dude, there's no chance I'm waiting for you. The waves are pumping. So I ended up paddling out there and had a really good surf. And then I came in and Steve Ryan, a photographer, was on the stage. He's like, oh, it's got way bigger, hasn't it? I was like, yeah, there's 10-foot sets. And he's like, oh, your friend Mark Philippoussis is looking for you. He just paddled around the button. He nearly got washed. Like he nearly copped a big one on the button. Like I'm surprised he got out. And I was like, oh really? Anyway, I bailed home, and then I had like people, I think Troy Brooks rang me and he's like, oh, have you seen Mark? Like apparently he's like, no one's seen him and his car's in the car park and people are looking for him. I was like, oh shit, what's happened? And anyway, he ended up getting a wave, getting a big one on the head, high tide, snapped his board, got washed like down the valley, like past the, you know, where the
Winki,
yeah, it's sort of where it like goes again, and he ended up like climbing up the cliff. He had cuts all over him from like getting washed along the reef, and he's hiding in like a nook sort of cave, and the tide was coming in and he was just freaking out. He ended up half his board, like he didn't know where it was, and then all of a sudden he saw it sort of floating like just out beyond the break, and he was like, I can swim to that, surely I can get, if I can get there, then like I can float down to Boobs and, you know, try and get in. Anyway, he jumped in, he ended up, he said he just got absolutely obliterated, got to his half a board and he was just clinging to the thing, and he was waving to these two guys out at Boobs, and he reckons they were just like waving back and giving him like a thumbs up, and he was like, he got to one of the guys, he's like, dude, how do I get in here? I'm like, I'm gonna drown. And the guy's like, mate, I'll help get you in. And I think he ended up giving Mark his board, took half his board, got to like Boob stairs, up the stairs, and gave him a lift back to Winki car park. By the time he got there was like so many crew, like, oh, you know.
Search party.
Yeah, and then he got back to Melbourne and the news crew were at his house at the front door interviewing his mum, and like he was just like, oh God. It was, yeah,
oh my gosh,
so
what
embarrassing.
a story.
But he's yeah, I think he learned a lot from that, and now he's, you know, he's out there and it's pretty big and having a crack. So it was. I can remember he rang me and he's like, dude, he rang me. I was like, where are you, mate? Are you lost? And then he just started losing it on the phone. He's like, man, I nearly died. And
oh my gosh, what a story!
So, yeah, it was
That's
entertaining, and that was, you know, when he was in his prime playing tennis. So he probably
Imagine
had sponsors and stuff who were like, oh, you know, probably had contracts where they're like, you're not allowed to, you know, surf, let alone surf 10-foot Winki at high tide.